moderator for this Q&A today. I am the son of professional wrestling in Hamilton. My dad was Bullwhip Johnson out of Hamilton. Some of you guys know. So it's my absolute honor to be here for the Legends of Wrestling Q&A panel. My name is Eric Johnston.
Samantha Hoover. Hi guys, how you doing?
This is Samantha Hoover. So coming to the ring first, the hardcore legend. You know him as Dude Love. I know him as Mankind. We all know him as Mick Foley, everybody. All right, coming to the ring next, we've got one of the biggest heels in WCW and WO history. Please welcome Eric Bischoff, everybody. Woo, I love it. Yeah. The heel power is still very strong here. I love it. Finally, you know this man as the Genius. Please welcome Lanny Poffo, everybody! Canadian American legend by way of Calgary. Right? I know, right? Okay, guys, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take questions. What we need you guys to do to come up to either to my side or Samantha's side. We'll file you through. We'll get your questions answered. If it isn't said loud enough, I'll repeat it back for the legends. But first of all, the legends are just gonna kind of talk off the top and maybe answer some questions you might have, guys. All right.
Right up top, yes, it did hurt when the Undertaker threw me up the cell. Don't ask that question.
No, I did not break into the business by mowing Vern Gagne's lawn or fetching his coffee.
Yes, I mowed Vern Gagne's lawn and got his coffee.
There you go. Those questions are answered right off the top.
Once you give up your pride, you have it all, baby.
That's how you gotta make it, especially as a Canadian. Here we go.
First off, we have Jim.
I'm not sure how up to date you are, Eric Bischoff, with the WWE product nowadays.
Well, I'm relevant as hell, brother.
If you were to go back to the WWE, which brand would you want to be with, Raw or SmackDown?
Oh, that's a hard one, you know, because I was so closely related, I guess, both as a competitor to Raw, and then I was fortunate enough to be a part of that show. It would be natural for me, I think, to pick that brand. However, there's a lot of really exciting stuff, like AJ Styles, for example, happening on SmackDown. There's kind of a fresher, cooler vibe to it. So it would be a hard choice. So I'd be grateful for either opportunity, to be honest with you.
Great question. We're gonna start on my side. Go ahead. What's your name, buddy? Angel.
I will say, talking to Eric yesterday, it is really impressive to see how up to date he is. You know, when I mentioned certain things about as good Raw, he's on it now. So yeah, I think once you kind of establish, for better or worse, that you're supposed to be an expert in the business, like I think you owe it to yourself and the people to kind of keep up.
Yeah, and I enjoy doing it. I mean, I am, first and foremost, I broke into the business. I was fortunate to break into the business. It was a sheer coincidence. But I was a fan since the time I was 6 years old. And that doesn't stop just because I don't get a paycheck, you know, from a wrestling company. I'm still a fan, so I still love watching it.
Me too.
He's got a lot of questions. We're just figuring out right now which one he wants to ask.
Okay.
You know what? While we're figuring out, maybe we'll take it over to this side, on Sam's side.
All right, Jeremy, let's go.
Gentlemen, welcome to Canada. Welcome to Hamilton. I'd like to say that.
What do you mean? Right here in Hamilton, Ontario?
Right
Of course, we should have anticipated the cheap pop a la Mick Foley. I wanted to say that you know, the three of you have inspired people like myself and like my brother, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience. I've got a question for each of you. Mick, first question for you is, You're an amazing author. I love your books. So if you were to write another book, what would it be about? Mr. Bischoff, since you're a man with the business acumen and you're an astute businessman, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about what you think about the latest UFC purchase by WMG IME of $4 billion. And if you were represented by those guys, just like Ben Affleck, LL Cool J, The Weeknd, who all now invest in the UFC, would you do the same thing? And Mr. Poffo, I loved your rhymes, your poems. You were the original John Cena. I want to ask, who are some of your favorite guys to ride up and down the road with? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
All right, I go first. I am currently working on a project, and it's kind of cool that Eric is here next to me. I'm going to ask you people, adults, to read between the lines here. It's a project about my time as an ambassador in a red suit. You know what I'm talking about? And I'm about 2/3 of the way done, and I'm just writing a one-page summary to send to publishers. Probably, it will probably be published by WWE. There's a good chance it will. And so just earlier today, I know there's a perception that we may not like each other as we've had history. But I pulled him aside and said, hey, the book I was talking about, last night I did this one-page write-up, and if you don't mind, I'd like to read it to you and get some feedback. So you always try to get like 2 or 3 pre-readers whose opinions you respect, and so that would be Eric. So I think that's pretty cool. So I haven't read it yet, but I think that's a pretty cool thing. Right? So it's kind of like when you see past presidents getting along for a good cause, and you go, oh. And you know we're in Canada, right? Past prime ministers getting along, right?
I look forward to hearing it, by the way. And as far as my perception or my perspective on the UFC purchase by William Morris Agency and IMG, good for them. I don't know how the hell they came up with a $4 billion valuation on that. That's a big valuation. The company only generates probably $500 million a year in revenue. So that's a 10 times revenue multiple. So that somebody's got some big plans for that business. But I'm pretty familiar with the William Morris Agency. They represented me for a number of years. I'm now with the Creative Artists Agency. But one of the things that a William Morris can do is bring not only celebrity investors to the table, which is a great thing, it gets a lot of press, but they can also bring a lot of corporate muscle into the equation, and I'm pretty sure that that's the direction that they're going to take. In addition to that, they've got a very, very strong international footprint. William Morris has representation all over the world and can make a lot of things happen internationally faster than perhaps Zuffa Entertainment, which previously owned UFC, could on their own.
Thank you. He asked me who I enjoyed going up and down the road with. I've had about 10 minutes to think about it. And, is anybody older here? Because I'm going to be 62. Does anybody remember Lord Athol Leighton? Well, in 1974, I was so lucky that he befriended me, and we rode up and down the road together. And I thought he was a fantastic person to ride with. He taught me a lot. And but if you're thinking about WWF, WWE, I would say that my time with Rick Martel, Tito Santana, people that were not going to be vulgar to the waitress. See, because I would just die of shame if I were sitting next to somebody that thought that was funny. Because, see, I'll tell you something too. I also love, it's gonna sound whatever it sounds like, but I loved hanging around my brother and, of course, and my father. Because you know what? And many of you have come up to me and told me about your personal experience with Randy. And I want to say that he didn't look down on the people that looked up to him. And he always had time for an autograph or a kind word. Okay? Very good. And just remember, it's nice to be important, but more important to be nice.
I like that. I like that.
Right. I want to tell you why part of the reason I grew up in the wrestling business, looking up to the Poffo family. And this meant with all due respect. Usually when you say all due respect, you're about to say something terrible about the guy. When I was in world-class championship wrestling, somebody mentioned I was well known for my frugality on the road, right? And there was a legendary battle between me and Owen Hart as to who could stretch $20 the longest on the road. And I think I topped Owen 2 weeks in, like $18 and he 20 after 2 weeks. But Frank Dusek, you remember Frank Dusek, was on the road, and somebody said, geez, Cactus Jack, you're like the cheapest guy in the business. And Frank went, no. He goes, don't get me wrong. You are thrifty, not cheap. You are thrifty, don't get me wrong. But brother, you are not even in the league of the Poffos. What do you mean? And he told me these stories about the lengths that the family would go to save money because that's how you did it in those days, you know? And I was just like, oh my, as much as I looked up to the Poffos and the wrestling family, when I finally met them and I never got to know Randy very well, I was like, they save money, like, how can I be like them? And so that was always like the legendary, like, trying to live up to the example of the Poffos, you know? So it was, yeah, and I would chat like with people who knew them, tell me about the Poffos. So that was my, when I finally met Lanny, that was like, tell me how you did it.
Well, let me give you one little advice. You know the difference between overhead and non-reoccurring expense?
No.
Okay. If you waste your money on toilet paper, that's overhead. But if you buy a bidet, that's a non-reoccurring expense. And I would like to say that I got the cleanest bum in this room.
Okay. Andrew and I figured out what he wants to ask. Andrew, we're going to give a shot and we might have to do it together, okay? The question was, Lanny, what was your favorite move? What was your favorite move to perform over the years?
Okay, I have been, everybody thinks I invented the moonsault. Well, the truth is, I invented it 10 minutes after I saw a video of Tiger Mask. And he did it much better than I ever did. And I'm being honest, okay? So no, I didn't invent anything. I am not an inventor of moves. I am a stealer of moves.
And that's how the business was built. Thank you very much, Angel. We're going to take it to Samantha's side.
All right, we have Bernadette.
Hi, gentlemen. This actually is probably more a question for Lenny and Mick. You're charming, Eric, but this question is basically, everyone always asks, you know, who's your favorite guy to work with? I'm going to kind of flip it over and turn it upside down and say, when you walked in and you found out who you were booked against, you're like, oh man, is there anybody that you would rather have not been booked with? Maybe for, it doesn't have to be any particular reason. It's kind of interesting to kind of know these things after the fact, right? So, who would you rather have not been booked with?
That's looking at the glass half empty, right? That's not a DDP like style thing. I'm not going to name names, but I wanted to work hard and I wanted to have good matches. So I just didn't want to be out there with people who weren't interested in that same goal. You know, I wasn't interested in taking. I later became interested in taking shortcuts, but for the bulk of my career, I wanted to work hard. I wanted to give people their money's worth, and that was the only problem I would have with people who didn't feel the same way. Other than that, I was fine with just about everybody.
Fair enough.
Well, he's
Al Snow.
he's deceased now, and you know, but so is everybody else, right? And I don't want to mention Bam Bam's name. Oops. But you talk about being cheap. Wikipedia him, he couldn't pay his child support. My father paid the hell out of his child support. I was raised in absolute privilege. And so when you talk about my dad being cheap, another thing that I want you to know, when my father got the news in 1963 that Gorgeous George had died, the original Gorgeous George Wagner, my father called up Betty, his wife, and found out he did not know that they were divorced. He did not know that George had been living in a flop house. He says, we don't even have enough money to bury him. And my dad said, if it wasn't for Gorgeous George encouraging me when I was young, I wouldn't have stayed in the business and done well. So I would be honored to pay for the funeral of Gorgeous George, and he sure did.
Amazing. We've got Sydney over here with a question. Sydney, go ahead.
I got a question for all of you. Who is your favorite childhood wrestler?
Can I ask you two questions? Who is your favorite wrestler and why am I?
Because, well, so, you're my favorite wrestler because, well, since you've been around, you've been playing two parts, like two wrestlers.
You're just forgetting about Dude Love, aren't you?
I do love too.
Okay.
Cactus Jack, do love.
My favorite childhood wrestler, I went through a period when I was much younger where I loved watching Bruno and Chief J and Ivan Putski, but then when I really got back into wrestling, in my mid-teens, Jimmy Superfly Snuka was my favorite guy. And then as I learned more and watched, especially the Japanese tapes, I loved Dynamite Kid and Terry Funk and Bruiser Brody. They became like the three guys that I watched over and over. Stole from, I basically have done a really good job of being a second-rate Terry Funk for a long, long time.
Who's your favorite Mr. Bischoff?
I have three, because when I was really young, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I lived in Detroit till I was about 13 years old. And growing up in Detroit, watching wrestling, my favorite wrestler was Bobo Brazil. Then when I moved to Pittsburgh, when I was about 13 or 14, Bruno Sammartino was my favorite wrestler. And this is before cable television, so the regional territories were very strong then. And when I moved to Minnesota, I would have to say it was a toss-up. Ivan Putski was definitely in there, but probably Nick Bockwinkel was truly one of my favorites.
Poffo. Yes, that's okay, I'm not mad. Okay, who's my favorite wrestler when I was a boy? Johnny Valentine, Red's father. And I saw a match in Comiskey Park, Pat O'Connor versus Buddy Nature Boy Rogers. I dare you to find anything better than that from the 60s. And I don't want to be redundant, but Nick Bockwinkel.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you for being such a smart young lady.
Yeah. She's better on the mic than I am, and I'm a professional. Well, I call myself a professional. Same side.
All right, William.
Hi guys, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you guys. I have a quick question for each of you, starting with Lanny. Lanny, my question for you is, sorry, a little bit of brain fart there. My question to you, Lanny, is your character. You are a genius. I believe you're a genius. But how did you come up with that? Second, for Eric Bischoff, I'd like to thank you, Eric, for the peace sign when I was taking a picture. You're a class act, appreciate it. And Mick, my question, Eric, my question for you was going to be, the things you liked and disliked about both going into the different organizations of WWE and WCW. And Mick, I just wanted to thank you from everybody because you are my favorite wrestler. My question to you is this. Over the years, you have been the hardcore champion, and you have scared both your family, I'm sure, and your fans alike. Has there been a moment in that career that you got scared yourself and wonder if you went a little bit too far?
Oh yeah, sure. Many times. I hope there were no close-ups of me when I actually got up on top of the cell, because the biggest lie I ever told in my life was when I assured both Mr. McMahon and The Undertaker that I had been up on top of that cell earlier in the afternoon, and I felt comfortable there. Truth is, I had not been up there, or had I been up there earlier in the afternoon, I would not have been up there later in the evening. And all I could think of was, how do I find a way to climb down this cage without killing my career? Like, if I could have, I was absolutely terrified. I was terrified. And I don't curse much. You probably 25 years, you probably never heard me curse, right? And I always say, like, a Diamond Dallas Page needs about 3 F-bombs to describe the birth of a fuzzy puppy, right? So, it's rare to find a guy who doesn't swear in wrestling, but I think in curses. So when I was up on top of that cell, I was thinking repeatedly, what the F were you thinking? You know, and I was so glad when Jericho wrote his book, because he said he was thinking about going up there and doing something. He did go up earlier in the afternoon, and he said, the people looked like ants below. He goes, I am not exaggerating, they looked like ants. And I'm just going to add to that by saying, when I was up there, I thought to myself, they looked like mother effing ants. That was the most scared I'd ever been, for sure.
You know, I can't honestly say that there was anything that I disliked or was uncomfortable with in any organization. When I went to WCW, I was dead broke. I was in the middle of bankruptcy. They were hauling the cars out of my driveway. I was feeding my kids beans and hot dogs. I was bouncing checks for diapers, to crying out loud. So when I got the opportunity to go to work for WCW, if they would have said, okay, here's your job, you're gonna do a little bit of announcing, but you're gonna clean out the toilets, I would have been thrilled to death with that opportunity. So I was so grateful for the opportunity that I can't think of one thing that was a negative. When I went to go to work for WWE, that was a real life changer for me, because I had been through so much, and a lot of it was negative towards 1998, 1999, and afterwards when I wasn't able to buy WCW. I had a very bitter taste in my mouth about the wrestling business. Not as a fan. I still love wrestling as a fan, but the business, I thought I was done, and I was convinced that my story within wrestling was at an end, and it ended badly. And when I got the call from Vince McMahon to come to WWE and be a performer, I knew within 30 seconds of that conversation that I was going to be able to do something that I was pretty decent at. I had a lot of confidence in my skill as a performer, but I also knew I was going to be able to end my career on a positive note by working with some of the best people in the business, so many of whom I had never worked with before, on the largest stage in the business, with one of the most professional companies in the business. And I was so grateful to end my career on a positive note that if Vince would have said, okay, pal, but this is what you're going to do, I would have been happy to do that, just like I would have been happy to clean out toilets in WCW. So I was good with it either way. I can't say anything bad about it.
Very good.
Okay, in 1985, I came to WWF in June. About 2 months later, I get invited to, does anybody remember TNT, Tuesday Night Titans? So I knew as a suffering babyface, if I was going to be boring, I would never be invited back. So I wrote a poem for the occasion. And when they went to black, which is the little term we have of the commercial break, Vince McMahon says, Lanny, that was great. From now on, you're going to do a poem before every match. And I pretended to be blasé, but inside that inner child went, yes! Because a wrestler without a gimmick is very boring, and I can bore you like nobody else. So, as Leaping Lanny, I got to do the poems and do the thing, and throw the frisbees, and it was great marketing. They sold them for $3 a pop, and then when I became that genius, full of glory and renown, let me just say, no, I am not a genius. I'm not the world's smartest man. I'm not even the smartest man on this panel. But I wrote my own poetry, and that's true. So it was much easier as the genius, because when I went to a place called Omaha, Nebraska, I said terrible things about the Cornhuskers. So whenever I went to, like in Hamilton, I don't know, probably the Blue Jays, I said, I hope you lose, because I know that well, some of you are against the Blue Jays, but I mean, and you know who I want to give thanks to? When you think about it, here I am as the genius. If Bobby Heenan would have complained about it, because he was the brain, he didn't complain about it, and I tell you, I love that man so much, because he could have nipped me in the bud, because he was the genius and he was the brain. You see the difference? But I didn't have 20-inch arms, so I pointed here. That's all.
Well, you may not be a genius, but you're an artist in every sense of the word. We've got time for one more question on this side.
Sure. First, I want to thank you guys for beating the hell out of your bodies for as long as you have. And I'm looking at the crowd, and most of this, this crowd here is a generation I'm from, in my 40s or whatever. And back then, there seemed to be a lot of wrestlers with a lot of gimmicks, and you just said it yourself. A wrestler without a gimmick is boring. So I find today there's so many wrestlers out there that are just coming out there now. Their moves are incredible. But Mick, since you're more involved, it seems now with Raw, or is there going to be more gimmicks coming? Because my 12-year-old son's watching, and sometimes it does get a little boring, I gotta say.
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't say gimmick, I mean, character.
But by gimmicks, I mean, like we grew up with bulldogs and snakes and parrots, right? And all kinds of stuff, right? Whereas now...
Well, you know what, yeah, there's but I think everyone tends to look back nostalgically and kind of forget the bad stuff. I'm going to throw out things like Mantor, you know, that there was a tendency for people, as Kevin Nash would say, to be jobs. You know, like you were a garbage collector, you were a repo man, you were a Mountie, and those things, after a while, they were very one-dimensional, and we had to evolve because of the Monday Night Wars. I mean, the pivotal moment to me in the Monday Night Wars and in my career was sometime late '97 when Mr. McMahon gathered everybody around and said, we're not going to make it unless we adapt. We need people to start taking their own personalities, start turning the dial up. And so those are the characters that work best these days. You know, like Kevin Owens is a great character. He's just a guy, Kevin Owens, but he's a great character. Seth Rollins is a great character. You know, AJ Styles, the knock on him is he could do everything, but he couldn't talk. He can talk now. You know, he's a five-tool player, as they say. So I think wrestling gimmicks could be really limiting. They were more easily pulled off when you had a series of lopsided matches on a one-hour show. Much tougher to be just a gimmick guy when you have to be someplace for 1, 2, 3 years. You have to constantly adapt, and you have to give people good matches, you know, and it becomes really difficult to be a one-dimensional gimmick in today's day and age. I'd love to see some more characters, but you have to be able to go in the ring, you know, and that's, you know, Lanny became the genius, but he was still the innovator of the moonsault in the United States. You know, it's hard if you go. So everyone's got to be able to go, and I think, you know, the days when a guy could just be a one-dimensional gimmick character are pretty much over. Okay?
Thank you.
That's amazing. What a way to finish, guys.
It's a downer. We need a happy question.
Okay, so
let's get one more question.
One more happy question.
Right, this is from Vic.
Okay, Vic's got one.
All right, guys, pleasure. Thank you for coming today and the whole weekend. We appreciate it. Question for Eric. Who came up with the 3 words, New World Order?
Well, as far as wrestling goes, I'll tell, it's a funny story, I've told it before, and I'll try to tell it really quick. But we weren't sure that Hulk Hogan was actually going to do what we planned on him to do. We weren't sure he was actually going to turn heel. I hate to talk like that, but we didn't think he was going to make that character change. He had a lot of concerns about it, and it was hard for him to do it. We had a plan B. Plan B was Sting, just in case for whatever reason Hulk changed his mind. But when Hulk showed up, and we kept him away from the building, so he and I didn't get a chance to rehearse. And oftentimes when Hulk was on the show, he and I would rehearse his interviews together because we had a good chemistry that way, and I could help him through his promos and help him at least frame them in his mind so that when he got out there, he knew what he was going to do. So he got to the building late because I was trying to keep him secret. I didn't want anybody to see him. I didn't want to read about it in a dirt sheet or on somebody else's hotline. So he came about an hour before he was supposed to go out, which was the first time that he and I had seen each other in a number of weeks. And we went in, and I found a little office, and it was just he and I was helping him go through his promo that we knew he needed to say after he, made the change in the ring. And I was literally describing it to him, and the words, and this is going to be the new world order of professional wrestling. And the words rolled off my tongue. I swear to God, I had never thought it before. I didn't come up with it like earlier in the day or a week before. It literally spontaneously rolled off my tongue, and as it did, I went, Ooh, that's pretty good. I like that. Not knowing it would work, by the way. But that's where that came from. Now, where I got it from, I like to read a lot. And I like to read a lot of history. So there's a long historical and biblical references to New World Order, and I'm sure that's probably where they got planted in my consciousness. But as far as wrestling goes, it literally was a spontaneous moment in a closet.
Okay, so that's all the time we have.
Can I just say one thing in closing?
Sure, in closing.
And I think I speak for Lanny and Eric that these conventions, they're fun for us because when you do an appearance for WWE, you're usually not in a position where you have anything but a packed line for 2 hours and you're out of there, and that's great. Don't get me wrong, it's great. But when you have some time to spend with people and you hear stories, and some of them really do touch your life, it reminds you of why you got into this stuff and what's important, and then to be able to have a conversation with Eric or talk to Lanny about Mike the Hippie Boyette and Chris Colt and guys that didn't get the attention they probably deserved. It's fun, and I hopefully when you leave our tables, you get the sense that we enjoy being here because we do. So appreciate you coming out.
I want to get the last word here. I want to step on your applause. I want to get the last word because I feel guilty about something. I know you love the business, the wrestling business, and I know that the three of us love the wrestling business. But in all honesty, if I were on the top of the cage and I looked down and saw ants, I would gingerly crawl down. And if that means I don't love wrestling, well then so be it. But I love my nose, I love breathing through it.
Wait, a little secret about that night. If you look now, look at the first cell match, and then every subsequent cell match, every match except the one with Shawn Michaels, I think I'm on technically the fourth, but the second, heavily promoted match, only the first two had the regular match, and everyone since then has had footholds. Because I couldn't climb the cage, I couldn't climb. And I lost feeling in my fingers for like a week. I didn't think I was going to be able to climb it. If I thought I could have climbed down, I would have. But I couldn't, so if I was a genius, bet your life I would have climbed down,
I'm going to say I love wrestling, but he really loves wrestling.
Keep it going for
We all love you guys. Thank you very much.
Everybody, thank you so much, guys. Sam.